My baby didn't have a chance. No grandchildren, can't walk her down the aisle.
Heartbreak and anger from a family who lost their little girl too soon. A judge sentenced Alianna DeFreeze's killer to death today. Christopher Whitaker killed the 14-year-old last year, kidnapping her on her way to school. Good evening. I'm Sarah Schuckman.
I'm Chris Tallien for Russ Tonight. Aliana's body showed sign of torture and rape. Tonight, her parents think the punishment of death is too kind. They wanted him to suffer life behind bars.
This is the abandoned building where Aliana's body was found on January 26, 2017. 14-year-old Alianna DeFreeze kissed her mom goodbye and left for school in Cleveland, Ohio. She caught her usual bus at 6:45 in the morning. Security cameras captured her getting off at her transfer stop, but she never made it onto the second bus. 3 days later, police found her body in an abandoned house. What they discovered there was so brutal that even her neighbors cried out in pain. And who was responsible? A registered sex offender who should never have been walking free. His confession will make your blood run cold. Welcome to our channel. Right now, there are thousands of children like Aliana who are walking to school every day, completely unaware that predators are watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If you want to help spread awareness about child safety and the system failures that cost innocent lives, then please like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Your action now could help protect another child who might be in danger. Alianna DeFreeze was only 14, and at that stage she had this infectious smile and a laugh that made everyone around her feel happy. She lived with her mom Danisha and her grandmother in Cleveland, Ohio, and they absolutely adored her. Now, Aliana had some learning challenges. She was diagnosed with a developmental disorder that made her a bit more trusting than other kids her age, but her family saw this as part of what made her so special. She was pure-hearted, always seeing the good in people, always ready to help anyone who needed it. Every morning, Aliana followed the same routine. She'd wake up early, get ready for school, and catch the 6:45 bus from East 93rd and Kinsman. Then she'd transfer to another bus that would take her to E-Prep and Village Prep Woodland Hills campus for her morning classes. Her mom expected her home by 4 p.m. every single day, and Aliana never missed that schedule. Their neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it felt safe enough. Families had been living there for years, kids walked to school every day, and parents trusted that their children would make it home safely. It was just another working-class area in Cleveland where people looked out for each other. Danisha had taught Aliana about stranger danger, just like any responsible parent would. She thought she'd covered all the bases. She thought her daughter knew how to stay safe. But here's the thing about predators. They don't always look like the monsters we warn our kids about. Sometimes they blend in perfectly, waiting for the right moment, the right victim. And on January 26, 2017, one of these predators was waiting at Aliana's bus stop, ready to destroy everything this loving family had built. Thursday, January 26th, started like any other day for the DeFreeze family. Aliana woke up around 6 a.m., got dressed, and grabbed her backpack. Her mom, Danisha, was getting ready for work, and they shared their usual morning routine. Nothing felt different. Nothing seemed wrong. That morning, Aliana walked to her bus stop at East 93rd and Kinsman, right on schedule. The security cameras in the area captured her getting on that first bus just like she did every school day. She looked completely normal, backpack over her shoulder, ready for another day of classes. The bus took her to her transfer point at East 79th and Kinsman, where she needed to catch a second bus to get to school. This is where the cameras captured something that still gives investigators nightmares. When Aliana stepped off her first bus that morning, she wasn't alone at that stop. A man was already there, pacing back and forth like he was waiting for something or someone. The cameras show Aliana walking toward the second bus stop, but then something made her stop. She turned around and looked at this man who was still pacing. You can see her hesitate. Then she takes 2 steps backward, away from him. That man was Christopher Whitaker, a 44-year-old registered sex offender. And those 2 steps backward that Aliana took, They showed that her instincts were screaming at her that something was wrong. She knew she was in danger, but it was too late. What happened next isn't captured on camera, but we know that Whitaker approached Aliana. We know he convinced her to come with him somehow. Maybe he threatened her, maybe he lied to her, maybe he used her trusting nature against her. Whatever he said, it worked. Aliana never got on that second bus. She never made it to school that day. Back home, Denisha went about her normal routine. She went to work expecting that when she got home at 4 p.m., Aliana would be there waiting for her, probably doing homework or watching TV. But 4 p.m. came and went. No Aliana. At first, Denisha wasn't too worried. Maybe Aliana had stayed after school for something, or maybe she was walking home with friends. But as the minutes ticked by, that worry started growing into something much worse. By early evening, Denisha was calling Aliana's phone over and over. No answer. She started calling friends and family members, asking if anyone had seen her daughter. Then came the phone call that every parent dreads. Denisha called the school to ask if Aliana had stayed late for any reason. The person on the other end of the line checked the attendance records and delivered news that made Denisha's world collapse. She never showed up today. Those 5 words changed everything. Aliana hadn't been at school all day. She'd been missing for almost 10 hours and nobody knew. This is where the system failed Aliana in the worst possible way. Most schools have policies about calling parents when kids don't show up, especially kids with special needs like Aliana. But somehow no one from her school had called to check on her. If Denisha had gotten a call that morning saying Aliana wasn't in class, she could have started looking for her immediately. The police could have been notified right away. Those crucial first hours, when finding a missing person is most likely, wouldn't have been wasted. Instead, Aliana had been in the hands of a predator for almost half a day before anyone even knew she was gone. Denisha immediately called 911. She told them everything: when Aliana left, where she was supposed to go, the fact that she'd never missed school without calling. The police took the report seriously and started searching right away. But Christopher Whitaker had already had hours with Aliana. Hours to take her wherever he wanted. Hours to do whatever he planned to do. And what he had planned was worse than anyone could have imagined. The search team spread out across Cleveland, checking every place a 14-year-old girl might go. They talked to her friends, her teachers, anyone who might have seen her. They pulled security camera footage from every business along her bus route, but Aliana was nowhere to be found. What do you think happened in those missing hours? Drop your theories in the comments below. For 3 days, the DeFreeze family lived in absolute hell. Not knowing if Aliana was alive or dead, not knowing if she was being hurt, not knowing if they'd ever see her again. They had no idea that their worst nightmares were already coming true. Meanwhile, investigators were working around the clock to piece together Aliana's movements that morning. They collected security camera footage from every business along her bus route, every store near the transfer point, every building that might have captured something useful. What they found on those cameras would haunt them forever. The footage showed Aliana getting off her first bus, just like she did every school day. But then they saw him, Christopher Whitaker, pacing back and forth at the bus stop like a predator stalking his prey. The cameras captured the moment Aliana hesitated, those 2 steps backward that showed her instincts screaming danger. And then they saw Whitaker approach her. But the cameras couldn't show what happened next. They couldn't show how he convinced her to come with him, what lies he told her, what threats he made. All they knew was that Aliana never got on that second bus, and she was last seen walking away with a man who had no business being near a child. Police immediately began searching for Whitaker, but he seemed to have vanished. They checked his known addresses, talked to his family members, and put out alerts to every officer in the city, but Cleveland is a big place with thousands of abandoned buildings, empty lots, and places where someone could hide a kidnapped child. For 3 days, the search continued. Denisha barely slept, barely ate. She spent every waking moment either out looking for Aliana herself or sitting by the phone, hoping for news. The community rallied around the family, organizing search parties and distributing flyers with Aliana's picture. Local news stations covered the story extensively. Aliana's face was on every channel, in every newspaper. Tips poured in from people who thought they might have seen her, but each lead turned into a dead end. Each false hope crushed the family a little more. On the third day, January 29th, police decided to search an abandoned house on Fuller Avenue, not far from where Aliana had disappeared. The house had been empty for years, its windows boarded up, its yard overgrown with weeds. It was the kind of place that neighbors complained about, the kind of place where drug dealers and criminals liked to hide. The officers who approached that house had no idea what they were about to find. They had searched dozens of abandoned buildings over the past 3 days, always hoping but never finding anything. This felt like just another empty building to check off their list. But as they got closer to the front door, they noticed something that made their blood run cold. The door was slightly open, even though it should have been secured. There were signs that someone had been there recently. The officers called for backup before entering. They knew that if Aliana was inside, they might also be walking into a trap. If her kidnapper was still there, they needed to be ready for anything. When they finally entered the house, they had to use flashlights because there was no electricity. The house was dark, cold, and filled with the smell of decay and neglect. But as they moved through the rooms, their lights picked up something that made their stomachs turn. Blood. Lots of it. There were bloody footprints leading from the front of the house toward the back, smears of blood on the walls, as if someone had been dragged or had stumbled while bleeding. The officers followed the trail, their hearts pounding, knowing that whatever they found at the end of it would be something they'd never forget. The trail led to a bedroom at the back of the house. The door was closed, and there was more blood around the frame. One of the officers took a deep breath and kicked the door open. What they found inside that room was beyond anything they had prepared themselves for. In the corner, in a pool of blood, was Aliana's body. She was naked except for her socks, her clothes scattered around the room like discarded trash. But it wasn't just that she was dead. It was how she had died. The officers could see immediately that she had been tortured. There were wounds all over her body, injuries that could only have been made by tools. Her face was so damaged that it was almost unrecognizable. Scattered around the room were the tools that had been used on her: a drill, a hammer, a box cutter, a screwdriver, all of them covered in blood. All of them evidence of the hours of torture that Aliana had endured before she finally died. Even the most experienced officers at the scene had to step outside to compose themselves. Some of them threw up. Others just stood there in shock, unable to process what they had seen. This wasn't just a murder, this was something evil, something that went beyond anything they had encountered in their careers. A 14-year-old girl with special needs had been tortured to death by a monster who had been walking free in their community. The crime scene team worked for hours, documenting everything, collecting evidence, trying to piece together exactly what had happened in that room. But everyone who was there that day knew that some images would never leave their minds. Alianna DeFreeze had been found, but not the way anyone had hoped. The search was over, but the real work, finding her killer and making him pay, was just beginning. The moment investigators found Aliana's body, their focus shifted from rescue to justice. They had a crime scene that told a horrific story, but they needed to find the monster responsible. Fortunately, they already had their biggest clue, those security cameras that had captured everything. The footage clearly showed Christopher Whitaker at the bus stop, pacing like a predator waiting for prey. His face was visible, his movements were recorded, and there was no doubt that he was the last person seen with Aliana before she disappeared. Police immediately put out a manhunt for Whitaker. They had his photo, they knew his criminal history, and they knew he was dangerous. What they discovered about his past made their blood boil and raised serious questions about how he was even walking free. Christopher Whitaker was 44 years old and had been a registered sex offender since 2005. 12 years earlier, he had brutally attacked a woman, beating her so severely that she nearly died. He had served time for that attack, but clearly prison hadn't changed him. If anything, it had made him worse. The system had failed before Aliana was even born. Whitaker should have been locked up for life after that 2005 attack. Instead, he was released back into the community, free to hunt for his next victim. And when he saw Aliana at that bus stop, a vulnerable 14-year-old with special needs, he saw the perfect target. It took police 2 days to track Whitaker down. They found him at a relative's house, acting like nothing had happened. When they arrested him, he didn't resist. He just looked at the officers with dead eyes, like he knew his time was up. The interrogation began immediately. Detectives sat across from Whitaker in a small room, knowing they were face to face with someone who had tortured a child to death. They had to stay professional, but inside, they wanted to tear him apart. At first, Whitaker tried to lie. He claimed he didn't know anything about Aliana, said he'd never seen her before, insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But the detectives had the security footage. They had witnesses who placed him at the scene. His lies fell apart within minutes. When confronted with the evidence, Whitaker's story started changing. First, he admitted he had seen Aliana at the bus stop, but claimed he never talked to her. Then he said maybe they had a brief conversation, but nothing more. Each lie was more pathetic than the last. The detectives knew they had him, but they needed a confession. They needed him to admit what he had done to Aliana, not just for the case, but for her family. They deserved to know the truth, no matter how horrible it was. Finally, after hours of questioning, Whitaker broke down. The weight of the evidence, the pressure from the detectives, and maybe even a tiny bit of guilt finally got to him. "Everybody's gonna hate me now," he said.
"The world is gonna hate me now, and she never had a chance to grow up, never had a chance to experience anything, and I took that away from her, and there's nothing I can do to bring her back."
Whitaker admitted that he had approached Aliana at the bus stop, telling her he needed help finding something. He used her trusting nature against her, convincing her to come with him to the abandoned house on Fuller Avenue. Once he got her inside, Whitaker's true nature emerged. He told detectives that he had planned to rob her, thinking she might have money or something valuable. But when he realized she had nothing, his anger exploded into something much worse. The details of what he did to Aliana in that house are almost too horrible to repeat. He tortured her for hours using tools he found in the abandoned building: a drill, a hammer, a box cutter, a screwdriver. He inflicted wounds all over her body, causing unimaginable pain and suffering. Aliana fought for her life. The crime scene showed signs of a struggle, evidence that she tried to escape, tried to defend herself. But she was just a 14-year-old girl with special needs, and Whitaker was a grown man with nothing but evil in his heart. When detectives asked him why he had done such horrible things to an innocent child, Whitaker's response showed just how twisted he really was.
I was so high, and I was so out of my mind, and it was like I was out of character, and I got what I got coming, and I deserve it.
That was his explanation for torturing a child to death. He was high on drugs and thought he might get some money out of it, as if that could possibly justify what he had done to Aliana. But the confession wasn't enough for prosecutors. They needed physical evidence that would guarantee a conviction. Fortunately, Whitaker had left plenty of it behind. DNA evidence from the crime scene matched Whitaker perfectly. His fingerprints were all over the tools used to torture Aliana. His blood was mixed with hers on the floor of that bedroom. There was no doubt that he was the killer. The forensic evidence painted a clear picture of what had happened in that house. Aliana had been tortured for hours before she finally died. The medical examiner would later testify that she had suffered more than 30 separate injuries, each one designed to cause maximum pain. Whitaker had shown no mercy to a child who had never hurt anyone in her life. He had taken someone's daughter, someone's granddaughter, and turned her final hours into a nightmare that no human being should ever endure. As the investigation wrapped up, one thing became crystal clear. Christopher Whitaker was a monster who deserved no sympathy, no second chances, and no mercy. He had destroyed an innocent life and shattered a family forever. The only question now was whether the justice system would finally do what it should have done years ago, make sure that Christopher Whitaker never had the chance to hurt another child again. The case was solid, The evidence was overwhelming and the confession was recorded. All that was left was to make him pay for what he had done to Alianna DeFreeze. When Christopher Whitaker's trial began, the courtroom was packed. Aliana's family sat in the front row, ready to face the monster who had destroyed their lives. They wanted to look him in the eye as justice was finally served. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They had security footage, DNA evidence, fingerprints, and Whitaker's own confession. But they also had something else, testimony that would make even the strongest people in that courtroom break down in tears. The medical examiner took the stand and described what had been done to Aliana in that abandoned house. Her testimony was so graphic, so detailed that several jurors had to look away. She explained how Aliana had suffered more than 30 separate injuries, each one inflicted while she was still alive. The tools found at the scene told the story of Aliana's final hours. A drill had been used to create wounds in her body. A hammer had been used to beat her. A box cutter had sliced through her skin. A screwdriver had been driven into her flesh. Each tool was covered in her blood. Each one evidence of the torture she had endured. What made it even worse was that the medical examiner testified that Aliana had been conscious for most of the attack. She had felt every moment of pain, every act of violence. She had died slowly, in agony, calling out for her mother who couldn't save her. The defense team knew they had an impossible case. There was no way to argue that Whitaker was innocent. The evidence was too strong, his confession too clear. So they tried a different approach. They begged the jury to spare his life, claiming he was mentally ill, that his drug addiction had made him do terrible things. But the jury wasn't buying it. They had seen the crime scene photos. They had heard the medical examiner's testimony. They knew that what happened to Aliana wasn't the result of mental illness or drug addiction. It was pure evil. The trial lasted only a few days. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. They recommended the death penalty without hesitation. When Judge Stuart Friedland announced the sentence, his words rang through the courtroom like thunder. He looked directly at Whitaker and said that his crimes were so heinous, so brutal, that death was the only appropriate punishment. He called Whitaker a predator who had shown no mercy to an innocent child and deserved none in return. But the most powerful moments came when Aliana's family was allowed to speak. Her mother, Danisha, stood up and looked at the man who had killed her daughter. Through tears, she told him that he had taken away the most precious thing in her life, that he had destroyed their family forever. Death is too good for him, she said, her voice shaking with rage and grief. He deserves to suffer the way he made my babies suffer. Aliana's grandmother spoke next, her voice strong despite her pain. She looked at Whitaker and said, "I can see the evil that's in him, and we have to tell everybody, this is what evil looks like." Other family members shared memories of Aliana, talking about her smile, her laugh, her kind heart. They wanted the court to remember that she wasn't just a victim. She was a beloved daughter, granddaughter, and friend whose life had been cut short by a monster. Judge Friedland sentenced Christopher Whitaker to death, and the courtroom erupted in applause. Finally, after months of pain and waiting, Aliana's family had gotten the justice they deserved. But the fight for justice didn't end with Whitaker's conviction. Aliana's family knew that the system had failed their daughter, and they were determined to make sure it never happened to another child. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Cleveland School District, arguing that if the school had called when Aliana didn't show up, she might still be alive. The case was settled for $1 million, but for the family, it was never about the money. It was about accountability. The real change came when Ohio lawmakers decided to honor Aliana's memory by passing new legislation. The Aliana Alert Law requires schools to notify parents within 2 hours when a student doesn't show up for class. It's a simple rule that could save lives by ensuring that missing children are reported quickly. The law also requires better monitoring of abandoned properties, making it harder for predators to find places to hide their victims. If these rules had been in place in 2017, Aliana might still be alive today. Aliana DeFreeze didn't stop there. She created a foundation in Aliana's memory, working to educate communities about child safety and supporting other families who have lost children to violence. She turned her grief into action, making sure that her daughter's death would mean something. As for Christopher Whitaker, he's currently sitting on death row in Ohio, waiting for his appeals to run out. His lawyers have tried everything to save his life, but the courts keep rejecting their arguments. The evidence against him is too strong, his crimes too horrible. Whitaker will likely spend the rest of his life in a small cell, knowing that he's hated by everyone who knows his name. He destroyed an innocent life and shattered a family, and now he's paying the price. The Aliana Alert Law has already helped save other children. Schools across Ohio are now required to call parents immediately when kids don't show up. And several missing children have been found quickly because of these new rules. What state or country are you watching from? Do you have similar alert laws where you live? Let me know in the comments. Aliana's story is a reminder that evil exists in our world, but it's also proof that good people can fight back. Her family took their pain and turned it into something positive, creating laws and programs that will protect other children for years to come. Before we end this story, I want you to remember Aliana DeFreeze, not for how she died, but for how she lived. She was a 14-year-old girl who loved to laugh, who trusted people, who saw the good in everyone around her. She had dreams, hopes, and a family who adored her. Aliana's legacy isn't the horror of her final hours. It's the laws that now protect other kids, the foundation that helps families, and the reminder that we all have a responsibility to watch out for the innocent. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Crazy Dark Files. Your support helps us tell these important stories and honor victims like Aliana. Rest in peace, Aliana. You are not forgotten.